It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators. The famous and not so famous. The controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here is Douglas Coleman.
Howdy-howdy-o, hey-ha. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. Nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I've been working on that accent, but I just don't think I'm going to quite get it right. So I'll just use the American accent, which I am accustomed to using. Dr. Gleb Tsipursky is here with us today. And Dr. Tsipursky is a professor at Ohio State University, as well as an author. And he's also the president of Intentional Insights, a nonprofit devoted to popularizing truth-oriented behavior, rational thinking, and wise decision-making in public discourse. Their main focus is something called the Pro-Truth Pledge. Say that fast 3 times. A project that aims to tide the lies and promote truth in public discourse through combining behavioral science and crowdsourcing. He is with us today. We had a very interesting conversation. Before we get to Dr. Tsipursky, we've got some music to play. We've got 2 submissions from Music X-Ray artists. Thank you very much for submitting through Music X-Ray. We've had lots and lots of great submissions through them, so please keep them coming. If we haven't got back to you yet, please bear with us as we are getting through them as quickly as we can. Today we've got 2. The first one is called I've Moved On by Don Carnevale, and that's spelled Carnevale. The second one is called Love on the Open Road, which is a nice country-sounding tune by Big City Cowgirl. So, without further ado, here is the music, and then the interview with Dr. Tsipursky.
I guess you don't understand what I had to say. I said what I meant, there ain't no more. This way, I thought you so much I can't fight anymore. I didn't even give a damn when you walked out that door. I moved on, I got 1,000 reasons why I can't go on. A million things I said and they all were wrong. I'm gone, I moved on. Don't keep making it hard for me. If you love me, let me be. You got another thing coming if you think you got another shot at me. Oh yeah, it's not alright. You got a lot of growing up, soul searching and working on what you wanna be. Now I'm sailing by. Standing on the shore, I'm still sailing by and I can't see you anymore. I've moved on, I'm so gone. I got a million reasons why this can't go on. Everything I said was always wrong. I'm gone, yeah, I've moved
on the open road. It's just something you can't put your finger on. It's a fast beating heart when the engine starts, knowing that anything goes. There ain't nothing like love on the open road. Laughing and talking about everything and nothing, lost in the moment, no fretting, no fussing. Miles of dirt and gravel under the wheels. And I thought to myself, this is how living life feels. There ain't nothing like love on the open road. It's just something you can't put your finger on. Interstates and highways, back roads and byways, anywhere the warm wind blows. There ain't nothing like love on the open road. We make cows underneath the Texas sun, crazy about each other and having some fun. It's just something you can't put your finger on. It's a fast beating heart when the engine starts, knowing that anything goes. There ain't nothing like love on the open road. Love on the open road. It's just something you can't put your finger on. Love on the open road. Nothing like love on the open road.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer, You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. All you got to do is get in touch with me on epsmusicproductions.com. That's EWPSproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me this spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Ooh, don't know my own strength.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome my guest, Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. How are you, Doctor?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Sorry, I'm going to trip over your name. It's just...
No worries.
But,
just call me Gleb. I don't stand on formalities. It's fine.
Okay, I'll call you Gleb. That's easier. The T is silent in your name, yeah?
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
It's Tsipursky. But, you have to get some practice with it in order to pronounce it correctly. So, not a big deal.
Okay. You said you were you were born in the...
I was born in the Republic of Moldova.
Moldova.
So, that's right. And it used to be part of the former Soviet Union. The country was conquered by the Soviet Union in 1945. And then when the Soviet Union fell apart, it became independent. So right now it's a separate country. My parents came here when I was 10. So I grew up here. I'm a U.S. citizen. This is my home.
I was going to ask you a little bit about what it was like living there, but do you remember anything from when you were a kid?
Oh, gosh. I remember waiting in long lines with my mom for food because when you have two people on the line, they give you more food than when you have one person because it was rationed. And I remember, stuff like that. I mean, like kid stuff, interacting with school things, but that was a distinct difference. I remember also coming over to the United States when I was 10 and being super excited about things like bananas and other tropical fruit, which you didn't have back in the former Soviet Union.
So when you left there, it was still part of the Soviet Union?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was in 1991, just a couple of months before the putsch against Gorbachev, and then the collapse of the Soviet Union in the end of 1991. My parents were leaving just because it wasn't a safe situation and they wanted something better for their kids.
Why do you think communism failed?
That's a huge question.
Yeah, in 2 words or less, please.
Yes, sure. Let's see. So I think, briefly. So I think I would say that it failed mainly because of two things. One was because of the transformations that were done by Gorbachev were done in such a way that they allowed regional elites to take power, and that the regional elites took away power from the center, and that resulted in the center collapsing. He wasn't willing to use force when he was doing the reforms to make sure the country stayed together. You can compare it to what happened in China with Tiananmen Square when they were going through similar liberalizing reforms, but they were willing to use force to keep the country together. So any authoritarian state is least stable when it's going through reforms, and if you're not willing to use force to try to keep it together, it's unlikely to stay together.
Oh, well, that's a great answer. I should introduce you and tell people exactly who you are and what you do. You are a professor at Ohio State University, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And what do you teach?
The history of behavioral science. So how people make decisions and how those decisions go wrong and how do you make good decisions effectively to help you achieve your goals in politics and in business.
And you're also an author. How many books have you written now?
I have written 3 books, and I'm working on my 4th, which is called The Alternative to Alternative Facts, Fighting Post-Truth Politics with Behavioral Science.
And then, on top of that, you've got a group called the Pro-Truth Pledge. Is that an organization?
That's right.
Or is that just...
It's a project of a larger organization. So Intentional Insights is a 501c3 nonprofit, and it's an organization where I serve as the volunteer president, and it's devoted to popularizing the research on behavioral science, so decision-making and rational thinking in business, politics, and other life areas. So the focus of it in politics is the Pro-Truth Pledge, and that is a project designed to roll back the tide of lies in our political system and promote the truth using a combination of behavioral science and crowdsourcing.
Okay, I'm not sure I even understand what that is. We'll have to get into that a little bit. I do want to bring up this last election, I think, as an example, because just from what we're talking about, I got the impression that Trump was the one candidate that was speaking the truth that a lot of people in this country just didn't want to hear.
He was definitely expressing a lot of sentiments, a lot of ideas that people in this country didn't want to hear, and that a lot of people thought were speaking to their guts, their emotions, so being authentic. Whether he was speaking the truth is a sort of a different issue. We want to be careful with our definitions of the truth. Was he factually describing some things on the ground? Was he talking about facts? Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. Was Hillary talking about facts? Sometimes she was, and sometimes she wasn't. We can talk about how you compare who is more truthful, but there are certain truths, like you say yourself, which Trump was expressing that other politicians were not expressing.
Right. Well, truth, I mean, there are scientific truths. 1 + 1 = 2. And then there are objective and sort of subjective truths where I could believe something. Let's take religion, for example. I could believe in a God, and yet there's no actual proof that a God exists. But in my mind, I believe it to be true.
Absolutely.
And if somebody tells me that, what was written in the Bible is true, and I choose to believe it, then that's sort of my truth, but it might not be your truth, right?
Yeah, in that sense, we have to differentiate between the truth about physical reality and the truth about people's beliefs. We have no idea, based on the physical reality evidence, whether God actually exists or not. We don't have physical evidence of the existence of God. We do know that if you state that you believe in God, that is true to you. You have a belief. It is true that you have that belief. It accurately describes your belief. So in the same way, we can have, so those are two different things. And I think your description of the difference between objective reality and subjective reality is a good one. Subjectively, you can say whatever you want about your beliefs, and that is an accurate description of your beliefs. It is true for you.
Okay, the Pro-Truth Pledge is, at least my understanding of reading this, is something that you would like to see, particularly with politicians who are notorious for just saying whatever to get the vote, to get elected. And now, is your objective to try to get the politicians to speak more truthfully on the issues or about themselves, or what exactly are they going to speak the truth about?
About objective reality. We can't read people's minds. Although I don't know what those, what the recent developments in technology are, but I don't think we can read people's minds. So we don't know whether people are subjectively speaking the truth. Let's go back to a hypothetical example. You say you believe in God, right? I can't read your mind and see whether you actually do believe in God or whether you're just saying. That's not something I can believe. Or let's say you like ice cream that is, chocolate flavor ice cream is your favorite flavor. I can't read your mind. I can't say whether you're just saying it or whether that's true. So we can't determine the truth about subjective things that are within people's minds. The only things that we can orient towards more truthfulness on are those objective reality facts, are those scientific facts. Does 1 + 1 = 2? Was there, will the new healthcare plan that Trump proposed be better in terms of, will it cause more people to be insured or less people to be insured? If we go into politics, is the United States militarily, though, stronger than the next 5 nations or not? those are things that we can objectively determine. So the goal of the Pro-Truth Pledge is to get politicians, all public figures, and private citizens as well, to be more oriented toward objective truth. Because as private citizens, in the 2016 election, as you mentioned, we had a huge problem with ordinary people sharing falsehoods, just blatant falsehoods. In the 3 months before the election, the top 20 fake news stories on Facebook, completely fake, made up. Things like that Bush was behind the 2011, the September 11 attacks, complete nonsense. Those things, those top 20 news stories, got more engagements than the top 20 news stories from credible websites like Fox News and Wall Street Journal. They got more engagements. They got something like the fake news stories got 8 million engagements, which is shares, comments, and likes, versus news stories from Fox News, Wall Street Journal, other credible sources getting something like 7 million engagements. That's terrible. So the goal is to change the behavior of ordinary people, politicians, and other public figures, news media, journalists, podcast hosts, radio hosts like yourself, and so on, and public commentators like myself, to get us all to commit toward objective truths that can be externally validated and determined.
I think people are more entertained by fantasy than they are with reality.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. So I really like the slogan that some people have expressed, that let's make politics boring again.
There's a good slogan, yeah.
Yeah, we don't need politics to be entertaining. Let's get our entertainment in Hollywood. Let's not get our entertainment in Washington, D.C. Let's make sure that politics are going to be boring and really oriented not toward fantasy and the imaginary land, but toward objective reality and sausage making of the actual issues involved, not kind of imaginations and magic and fantasy.
Well, I think technology has kind of blurred the line for a lot of people between what's real, what's fantasy, what's politics, and what's Hollywood entertainment. It used to be a lot more cut and dry, but now with everything on the internet all on the same page, you open up Yahoo's main page and you've got Kim Kardashian right next to Donald Trump, right next to the sports section. You know what I mean? And it all is kind of just runs together. And I think it's a little overwhelming for people to sort of separate what is, what they should really be believing and what is purely fantasy entertainment.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a real difficulty with the technology. And this is a reason why the venerable Oxford Dictionary has chosen post-truth as its word of the year for 2016, with the election campaigns and politics and so on blurring the line between fantasy and reality. And post-truth politics refers to a situation where appeals to emotions and personal beliefs, the subjective beliefs, overcome appeals to objective reality, where people don't really care about objective reality, and politicians who appeal to emotions and personal beliefs win out. So that is quite unfortunate situation. And the Pro-Truth Pledge at protruthpledge.org is designed to prevent that. One way it's designed to prevent that is so a group of behavioral scientists, including myself, have gathered together to see what kind of behaviors are shown by research in behavioral science to be correlated with the truth. And so that's what the Pro-Truth Pledge involves. It involves 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows are most likely to result in truth-oriented behaviors. I'm not telling you what the truth is. Just let's agree on the process. Let's agree on what are truth-oriented behaviors. And these are things like, I'm going to read some of them. Fact-checking information to confirm it is true before accepting it within yourself or believing it and sharing it with others. Citing, sharing my sources so that others can verify my information. Reevaluate if my information is challenged by others, and retract it if I can't verify it. Ask people to retract information that reliable sources have disproved, even if those people are my allies, and celebrate those who retract incorrect statements and update their beliefs toward the truth. And 7 more behaviors like this, that pretty much anyone who looks at them can agree are really oriented toward the truth. What does it mean to behave in a truthful manner? And that's what we want to do, to get everyone to commit to these behaviors. And that's a way that you'll be able to differentiate between politicians who are truth-telling and public figures who are truth-telling and ones who are not. If you see that they took the pro-truth pledge and they have the pro-truth pledge website badge on their website, you can know that they are being monitored to make sure that they stick to these 12 behaviors.
Well, the one thing that's interesting about politics is that it is not an exact science. And you're kind of mixing objective and subjective beliefs all in one person, because you've got facts that you can check and verify if people throw statistics at you. On the other hand, you've got people who have certain ideas of where they'd like to take the country politically. They want to change this about the government. They think this is going to improve the quality of life for people. And that's a guess. I mean, that's an experiment. They don't know if it's going to be successful or not. We talked about communism at the very beginning. That was the grand experiment, that everybody, everybody's going to be the same. There's going to be no more rich, no more poor. Everybody's going to have equal amounts of everything. Well, it didn't really work out so well. No, it didn't work out that way at all.
And I mean, if we look back to America in 1776, that was an experiment in democracy. How would democracy work out? That was a really big experiment. Nobody knew.
We still don't know.
Unfortunately, it worked out quite well up to this stage. We'll see what happens in the future.
America is still a work in progress. We're a very new country, and we've hit and miss. We've had some bad situations here, like slavery, and we've had some really good situations here, like people coming to this country without a penny, and, the classic immigrant story. They arrived in Ellis Island with a bag with their clothes in them, and in 20 years they were millionaires. So,
I think, talking about Donald Trump, his father was one of these immigrants, I believe, or his grandfather. But yes, coming and rising to where he is right now, absolutely. So that's kind of the heroic story of immigration. Yes, and I agree with you on the point that you were making before. There are going to be some subjective facts, some subjective ideas which we can't check, but they're not facts. The pro-truth pledge is meant to apply only to things that are verifiable, that are fact-checkable. So if we can get people to agree on these 12 behaviors, like fact-checking information to confirm it is true before accepting it and sharing it, and celebrating those who retract incorrect statements and update their beliefs, that would be great. In our country currently, we have a very unfortunate tendency to criticize people who change their minds based on new evidence as flip-floppers. That's really problematic. Don't we want leaders who, when they find out new information, are able to change their minds and update their beliefs? That would be great. That's the kind of leadership we want. We don't want leaders who are just going to stick to whatever their previous beliefs are, despite the evidence. So this sort of behavior is going to be really helpful if we can verify certain facts and get people to stick toward these facts.
Well, it is a great idea. I think the problem that I see kind of right off the bat is if you're applying it in the world theater, how do you fact check Kim Jong-un or Putin or somebody? We still have borders, we still have countries, we still have all of these things. We can keep our house clean in the United States, but if the rest of the world isn't doing it, it doesn't really benefit us to do it alone.
I would question that. I think it would be highly beneficial for us to do it alone, for us as a country, individuals, because then internally we'll be making much better decisions. Right now, let's envision the state of the country as it is right now. We have people where sharing fake news to such an extent that fake news in the 3 months before the 2016 election was pretty much outcompeting the actual real news stories.
True.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
How badly will that impact people's decision-making internally within the country itself? It's terrible. It's a horrible thing. That causes people to make really bad decisions in their political engagement, if they believe in myths, in falsehoods. Like I said, that Bush was behind 9/11. That's a falsehood. That obvious falsehood. There are plenty of other obvious falsehoods that are floating around it. So many people believe, and it's really horrible that this is the case. I mean, we can even go into Pizzagate. If they have real consequences, the guy who believed about that Hillary Clinton was somehow connected to a pizza parlor that had a sex ring in it went up and shot up the pizza parlor. I mean, that's terrible. That happens. That people believe that. I mean, I really admire Donald Trump for firing Michael Flynn Jr., who was spreading these ideas in his campaign. So I'm really glad that he did that. But ideally, we wouldn't have to have people shoot up pizza parlors before such people are fired who spread these mythical stories. That's really horrible for our decision making internally. I think we want America to not compete on being the lowest denominator. What other people do. We should be a role model for other countries. We should be more truthful than other countries. Don't we want more people to come to the United States who are truth-oriented? And, leaving countries like North Korea, well, if they can leave them, but they can definitely leave countries like Russia. And we should be the beacon of truth in our society, in our world, just like we are a beacon of democracy. Let's be a beacon of truth. And this is what the Pro-Truth Pledge is designed to accomplish.
The one thing that I find interesting about the United States is that we should be the role model for the rest of the world. And I think to some degree we are. But I think what's happened, and I think Trump hit on this, is that we've been taken advantage of. And the Paris Climate Accord, I think, was one where nothing was binding. There was nothing binding in those contracts. It's just kind of like, okay, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And we were the only ones doing it. Like everybody else wasn't following along. So he said, well, why should we be following along if everyone else isn't? Because it just made us, it screwed us, basically. This is what I meant about, the world theater. This is what I was getting at. I think you're right that in a domestic situation, it would certainly help improve the running of the United States. But in terms of us in foreign affairs, I don't know, because I know this is going to sound very simple and elementary, but we can't all seem to get along with each other at the moment. And until we do, there have to be walls, there has to be armies, there have to be weapons. Of course people are going to lie when you get into that realm of emotion. When you're dealing with, well, how many nuclear weapons do you have? Of course people are going to lie. So how many bullets in your gun?
This is a really good question. And so, let's talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
So the important thing about the Pro-Truth Pledge that was different from the Climate Change Accord is that it has an evaluation and monitoring mechanism. So in the Paris Climate Change Accord, we couldn't evaluate and monitor and punish the people who were defecting, who weren't cooperating with the accords. Whereas the Pro-Truth Pledge has a clear process of evaluation, monitoring, and punishment for people who don't cooperate. So it gives benefits to the people who cooperate. So if you imagine the climate change accords, if there are, let's say, 10 countries that have signed a climate change accord and the rest of the countries didn't, and the 10 countries that did sign a climate change accord are the ones that they have a strong evaluating mechanism to make sure those countries comply. Those countries get the appropriate reputation boost. What's the point of signing a climate change accord? You want to get a reputation boost, that you are a country that is oriented toward the environment, keeping the environment safe. In the same way, public figures and organizations that sign the Pro-Truth Pledge get a reputation boost. So that's what behavioral scientists, including myself, have evaluated what would make people behave more truthfully and why they're not behaving more truthfully, is that right now we can't tell apart people who are truth tellers in terms of objective reality. Again, we can't talk about subjective reality. We can't tell apart the truth tellers about objective reality and the people who are feeding us some BS. We can't tell those apart. Now, something like the Paris Climate Change Accord doesn't really allow us to do that either, because there doesn't have enforcement mechanisms to make sure that, if you stick on yourself a label saying, I'm a person with or I'm a country with climate change, but you don't do it, that doesn't really help. What has helped, according to the research that we've done, is labels, badges that come with significant monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. For example, badges, let's say, like putting organic on your product in the United States. So putting organic means that there's an enforcement mechanism to make sure that you grow your food in an organic manner, and that you grow, and by that token, people know that. That's communicated to people, and they're willing to pay more money for that food. Or let's say dolphin-safe tuna. That's another very clear and simple label that there's an enforcement mechanism to make sure that tuna fishermen and tuna producers have a dolphin-safe process of creating the tuna. So there has to be enforcement for the reputational rewards that you get, because people buy dolphin-safe tuna at a higher monetary value, and get organic products at a higher monetary value than they would. And similarly, people who take the Pro-Truth Pledge, whether they're people in the United States or people in other countries, they get a higher value of reputation from taking the Pro-Truth Pledge, and there's a concordant enforcement mechanism, evaluation mechanism to make sure they stick to it. That's what you need. You need that enforcement mechanism. Otherwise, appropriately, Donald Trump was criticizing the Paris Accords. The lack of enforcement mechanism makes them not meaningless, but much less meaningful than they would be otherwise.
Well, I think he put it as it was a complete waste of time, is what he said. And I think he was right, because you're chasing after something that there can be no enforcement to.
Enforcement is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's why, as part of the Pro-Truth Pledge, we have from the start, we have very clear enforcement. So for public figures, so we have the Pro-Truth Pledges for private citizens and for public figures. So anyone who's listening to the podcast right now can go to protruthpledge.org. Again, that's protruthpledge.org, and take the pledge. So if they click on the Take the Pledge button, they will see that one of the things they can do, they can put their name, they have to put their names and emails, then address. The point of putting in your address is so that volunteers from the Pro-Truth Pledge go to your representatives, your elected representatives, and tell them that, hey, 1,000 of your constituents want you to take the Pro-Truth Pledge. How about you take the Pro-Truth Pledge? So it functions as a petition. But one of the things they can do is say that they want to help with the Pro-Truth Pledge. And one of the aspects of helping is monitoring public figures who took the Pro-Truth Pledge. And if they notice that those public figures violated the tenets of the Pro-Truth Pledge, we have very clear definitions of what it means to violate it, which we can talk about. If they notice a violation, they would go to that public figure and ask that public figure to retract the statement. So let's say it's a congressional candidate. They would go to that person, ask that person to retract the statement. If she doesn't retract the statement, then there's a mediating committee that takes over the case. And so here's where we get into crowdsourcing. So we are borrowing this model from Wikipedia. Wikipedia has ordinary people who can edit everything behind the scenes, but then it has editors who have an official right to lock, who have more privilege and more priority in editing articles. So with the monitoring committee, that's people who have been part of the Pro-Truth Pledge for a while and who are reliable, who we can trust. They evaluate the case and try to get the public figure, the congressional candidate, to retract her statement. And if she doesn't at that stage, then that's when we go to the media, we go public. Before that, it's all private. Then we would email the media in her congressional district saying that, hey, she took the Pro-Truth Pledge, she shared this piece of misinformation, we tried to get her to retract it, she chose not to, a number of times. That means she deliberately intended to lie, to deceive the public who are deciding whether to vote for her. So this is a good story for you to consider writing. Then we also have an action alert to all the people in that person's congressional district saying, hey, this person has just been in contempt of the Pro-Truth Pledge. Here's the evidence. Can you tweet her, email her, call her, meet with her, protest her office, write letters to the editor about this? So basically make a big sting. And finally, list her as in contempt of the Pro-Truth Pledge on the Pro-Truth Pledge website. So people who are intending to deliberately deceive are just better off not signing the pro-truth pledge at all, because it's a significant reputation blow.
How big is this organization?
The pro-truth pledge?
Yeah.
Right now we have about 1,500 people who signed the pro-truth pledge and about 100 public figures. The public figures include people prominent intellectuals who might have heard of, people like Peter Singer and Steven Pinker. They include prominent radio show and talk show hosts. So, for example, Ethan Behrman, who is rated 57 talk show hosts by Talkers Magazine in the United States. And they have a number of politicians. So, and of course, CEOs, corporate leaders. So, for example, the CEO of Women's Radio Network, which is what it sounds like. And then a number of corporate leaders, nonprofit leaders, and some organizations that committed to the pledge as a whole as well. And politicians, I think we so far have something like around 30 politicians who signed the pro-truth pledge. So, and we rolled it out in, I think, late March. So it's only been a few months and we already are having quite good responses.
That's good. How long has this been active? How long?
So since late March. So, but we've been doing behind the scenes planning since the November election. And we've seen that has been kind of a situation that has called out to a number of behavioral scientists who have seen the presidential cycle. When we saw that statistic, the study that showed that the top 20 news stories on Facebook in the 3 months before the election outcompeted the top 20 real news the real news stories, that was just a wake-up call. I was like, okay, we need to spend some of our time and energy doing something about this because this is a really bad situation. So that's what we decided to do. We've been planning it behind the scenes for 6 months from November 2016 and rolled it out in March, late March 2017.
As well as the fake news, the news agencies, the news reporting agencies have become tremendously biased, and they never used to be. When I was a kid, you could watch NBC News or CBS News, and you got an unbiased news report.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of a sudden, there's lines drawn. They say, well, okay, Fox is conservative, CNN is very liberal, MSNBC is extremely liberal, and all of them are completely biased and known. People know that if they want the liberal slant, they go to this one. If they want the conservative slant, they go. They shouldn't be that way at all, as far as I'm concerned. I
absolutely agree, Douglas. Yes, it's a really sad situation that we have right now, that it is this way, and so this is why we want. One of the reasons it is this way is that people have a real difficulty telling apart who are the truth-telling journalists and commentators and people who are not. There are commentators on Fox News, on CNN, on MSNBC, on whatever platform you go to, who are more honest and who don't like to, lie and so on. But they are in the minority in their respective media venue, because the respective media venue, whether it's CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or whatever, leans in a certain direction. So this is why we want individual journalists and individual talk show hosts to take the pro-truth pledge. And then they will be monitored to make sure that the facts that they present are accurate. Now, we can't explicitly monitor any slant that they provide, but we can at least make sure that they stick to the facts, and the facts that they present are accurate. Unfortunately, for very many TV stations, radio stations, and so on, they would not be able to currently take the pro-truth pledge and stick to it. And most of the people wouldn't be able to stick to it because they share a lot of problematic facts. And we see a very strong drop in trust in the American media in recent years. So, for example, the latest poll I saw, Gallup has been doing a poll every September of trust in the mainstream media. And the last one was 32%. In September 2016. So 32% of the people, United States people, trusted the mainstream media. And that's really bad. The year before that, it was 40%. So an 8% fall, that's a huge fall of the proportion of people who trust. That's something like 20% fall of the people who trust the media in 1 year. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it's a very concerning trend, and that's why we want the honest journalists and the honest talk show hosts and the honest podcasters to take the approach of pledge and have the praise and have the credibility of being truth tellers.
Well, right. I think if one is unbiased, then truth sort of comes right along with that, because you would just be reporting the facts and not throwing in your subjective truth into the mix. It's very disturbing to me, and I don't like to watch the news at all because I'm so afraid to read something and find out that it was not real or heavily distorted.
Yeah.
And trying to find unbiased, factual news reporting online is been a challenge for me. BBC's not bad, and there's a couple others that are okay, but I miss Walter Cronkite. I really do.
Yes.
He was just the greatest reporter, I think, that we ever had. And journalist.
I hear you. That's one of the reasons that we have some of the behaviors at the Pro-Truth Pledge. Something that really worries me when I observe the mainstream news is when people don't distinguish when they editorialize, when they don't distinguish between their opinions of the journalist, the reporter, and the facts, because they distort the facts this way. So that's why one of the behaviors in the pledge says distinguish between my opinion and the facts, which means don't editorialize the facts. State the facts as they are, then say, hey, here's my opinion about the facts. Not say that, so that people can distinguish between the opinion, your readers, your listeners can distinguish between your personal opinion about the facts, which can be, liberal, coming from a liberal perspective, coming from a conservative perspective, that's fine. But they at least know what the facts are in a clear manner. And so we had conservative commentators like John Wells, who does Caravan to Midnight, take the Pro-Truth Pledge, as well as liberal commentators like Aaron Ra, who is a YouTube personality who has something like 150,000 followers, who is quite liberal, and he's running in Texas as a Democrat for Congress, for the state Senate in Texas. So we have people of all sorts taking the pledge and who are committing to distinguishing between their opinions and the facts, and who are committing to do things like citing their sources so that others can verify their information.
They used to do that on the news broadcast. They used to go to black screen and then come up, and then in big letters on the screen it would say, this is an editorial opinion. So they made it quite clear that this was different from the news broadcast. Now it's all mixed together. You can't tell what's real and what's somebody's opinion, and it's crazy.
The internet, what we were talking about before, digital technology makes it
even
much
harder.
easier to do that. It makes it even harder. It makes it much easier to confuse the two. So, for example, there was a study done by, and this is talking about commercial content, there was a study done by Stanford University which found that 80% of students who were participating in the study, I think they were looking at middle school students who are pretty technologically savvy, when they went to the website of Slate, they couldn't tell apart 80% couldn't tell apart the real content produced by Slate versus the sponsored content that was on the website. 80% of the people couldn't tell apart the difference between sponsored content, whether it's content that's put there by toothpaste company or put there by the Clinton campaign or the Trump campaign. They couldn't tell apart whether that's the sponsored content versus the actual news stories produced by Slate. So digital technology is making it so much harder than it used to.
Well, I agree. Well, some of those websites, it's almost impossible, especially the ones that are real ad heavy. You click on the wrong spot and you're gone. You're somewhere completely away from where you started. And I hate those websites.
You don't even know that. So that's the difficulty. People confuse the new site that they're on, and they think it has the credibility of the old site, whether if you start on the slate, which has credibility, but you end up, and 80% of the people who are confused click on the wrong thing, and they end up on a site that's not Slate, but the story is written in a Slate style, which of course advertisers do, then they are confused. The same thing with, if it's an advertiser, like I said, for toothpaste, that's random. More concerning is if it's the Trump campaign or the Clinton campaign or some other campaign putting in a political news story that's slanted in a very clear way, and people think it's been produced by Slate reporters.
The other problem is search engines. If you type in something on Google, I'll give you an example because I did this today. I typed in Hilton hotels, and I was trying to get the Hilton Hotel website. Well, if you type in that, you get about 16 different travel agencies that come up before the official Hilton Hotel website. All these people that want to sell the Hilton Hotel room through them so they get their commission. But it seems to me that Hilton Hotel should have the top spot and then down from there.
Yep, it would be nice, but that's not what pays.
But that's not what pays, right? So,
all right. So this is why the pro-truth pledge is so important, because people are not inherently, you would like it to be different, right? You would like there to be different. You would like news websites to be clearly distinguishing between opinions and editorials and so on, and the actual content. And they're especially sponsored products. But right now, the incentive for those news sites is to please the people who pay them, which is not the readers. The readers are a captured audience. So you need to do something that distinguishes the more truth-oriented websites, the more truth-oriented public figures, organizations from the less truth-oriented ones. So this is kind of the essence, coming back to the pro-truth pledge, why we're trying to do this, to help people differentiate, help people like you, help people like your audience members differentiate the truth tellers from the ones who are not so truth-oriented.
Aside from signing people up for the pro-truth pledge, are you also going to call out people who are definitely not eligible or not suitable for the pro-truth pledge?
We are not going to
You're not going to witch hunt,
call them out in the same way that, let's say, things like factcheck.org or PolitiFact or Snopes do so. But we will inform the media that certain politicians or public figures who we've approached a number of times have chosen to not take the pro-truth pledge, and that the media can choose to, write a story about that or not. That's kind of, information that would be out there. And of course, politicians who take the pro-truth pledge can choose to attack their opponents who choose not to take the pro-truth pledge for failing to take the pro-truth pledge. Like, what do you have to hide? Why are you not taking the pro-truth? So those are things that are viable, that are within the space of what's going on with the pro-truth pledge project. But we're not going to fact check people who haven't taken the pro-truth pledge. We're not monitoring them. We're not evaluating them. We're not calling them out, because we're not trying to push ourselves on anyone. We're inviting people to do so in the same way that, organization that gives, let's say, organic label or the dolphin safe label, it's not going to go out and pressure the fishermen who don't do dolphin safe tuna to condemn them. Oh, you're being bad for, killing all the dolphins. That's not the point. This is inviting people to participate, the ones who want to be known as truth-oriented. And, the rest of the people are, that's fine. I'm not concerned about them. We're not concerned about them. This is not our priority.
Well, I like that approach where if somebody does sign it and they're running against somebody who either refused to sign it or didn't sign it, and they say, well, what do you got to hide? Because it's not as if you're asking them for any real commitment that they shouldn't already be doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ideally, and the same thing, I doubt it would be so explicit for journalists and media figures, media personalities, but if you have, one podcast or one radio show or one journalist, media company that takes the pro-truth pledge, and another one that doesn't, well, which one are you going to trust more and which one are you going to read more? So it's kind of a natural incentive for people to take the pro-truth pledge, to counterweigh the incentive of the advertisers who are willing to pay them more money if they can confuse their readers into clicking on the advertisers and so on.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah. You get so many ads on there, then the pro-truth would be kind of a moot point because you would have people clicking on all kinds of stuff just to get the money, regardless of if it was even relevant to the site. Yeah.
Yeah, but at least you know that the actual content they produce is more truth-oriented, and they're not lying in the actual stuff that they
Well,
produce.
that's true. Yeah, that's very
So
true.
that is the benefit. That is what you want. We can't change everything. We can't address everything. There are only certain things that we can address, and it would be great if our country was such that we had all the public figures, all politicians, at least sticking to the 12 behaviors that I described earlier. And this is why we want all people, all listeners of this podcast, to go to protruthpledge.org and sign up and help make this change happen. Help fight lies and promote truth in our political discourse.
Well, Gleb, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We are out of time, unfortunately. Yes, please have everyone go to ProTruth. Is it protruth.org? ProTruth Pledge.
ProTruth Pledge. Yep, protruthpledge.org.
Okay, very good. Thank you for coming on the show. This was very interesting, and best of luck with this. I think this is a great project, and I think people need to sign up for it, particularly politicians.
I think so as well. As yourself, as a podcast host, would you be interested in signing up to it?
Oh, sure, I'll sign up for it. But it's kind of,
Excellent.
We don't do that type of reporting. Ours is, we do one-on-one interviews with people.
Sure.
So I'm not spewing out all kinds of lies because, it's completely irrelevant to my show. But I would be happy to sign it, sure. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Yes, the more people who are already truth-oriented we get to sign up as early adopters, the more pressure, the more publicity this has, then the more pressure it puts on others to ask them, why haven't you signed up yet?
Well, that's true. That's a good point. Okay. All right. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This was great.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. Please take the Pro-Truth Pledge. After all, what have you got to hide? Just go to protruthpledge.org and fill in your information, and you'll be a better person for it. Also, thank you to Don Carnevale and Big City Cowgirl for the music. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.